Driver's side, passenger side, lower control arms, and then you've got the two strut rods. And this is another great thing about Mike's kit is that most places you have to buy this and you have to buy this separately, but they include it with this kit. And this is where you get your big hammer, whether you call this the negotiator or the convincer. What's up guys, my name is Andy. This is one of those parts that has been on my list for a long time that I've wanted to put on my car, and it's finally here. I finally am able to install this on my car. This is a Mike Meyer lower control arm, the mod lower control arm that I'm going to put on my 66 Mustang. I've got their mod upper control arms on the car already, and that was an awesome install. Those upper control arms allow a little more flexibility and some tuning that my stock units wouldn't have, and plus the position of the spring perch improves the motion ratio of that shock setup. So that was an improvement I needed to do, and I put in some new lower control arms in the interim while I was waiting to get these, just because I needed to have something on there to replace the stock units. But now that I finally got these, I'm ready to put them on my car. And what's so good about these lower control arms is the serviceability, replaceability, and the adjustment that these provide that the stock units don't give you. This kind of goes along with the whole upgrade that I'm trying to do on my car and improve the steering and the handling of my car, make it more performance oriented. I'm less about going to the grocery store. I want to go out and I want to drive this car. I want to hit those corners hard, and ultimately I'm going to take it to the track. But in the meantime, I got to start upgrading the parts and getting things put on here that are designed to take the loads, to take the forces that this car is going to see, and provide the feedback that I'm looking for when I'm driving the car. I don't want something that's mushy and squishy. I want something that's precise and dialed in, and these lower control arms are the ones that I need, and I am pumped. So what you get with this, one of the advantages of this rod end here on the end allows for some camber adjustment that you just don't have in the stock setup. The stock unit, these are fixed, the stock flimsy, lower control arms, and they're just a formed piece of steel. They don't have an adjustment on the rear, so I can't, if you adjust this out, what it does is it'll push this outwards and it'll increase that camber, or give you more negative camber, and that'll give you a little bit better handling on your car as you're dialing the stuff in. And then the strut rods that connect in here are also adjustable, and you can increase or decrease the caster as you're trying to set up your car and get it out how you want. And then lastly, this ball joint on here this is the best one on the market. These are Howe, H-O-W-E, Howe ball joints. They're serviceable and replaceable, and you can dial in, by using these set screws and this adjustment on here in the back, you can dial in just exactly how you want this to be. If you want it to be looser or tighter, if you're noticing something's loose, you can go in and you can tighten up this ball joint, which the factory ones are common aftermarket units. You can't do that. They're just there. They are what they are, and if they go bad, you got to replace them. Sometimes you can replace the ball joints on other aftermarket lower control arms. Sometimes you got to replace the whole lower control arm. With this, I don't need to worry about that. I can keep this unit in my car, and if this ever goes bad and I can't service it, I can just put a new one in here and I'm good to go. I like that on my car. So let's go over to the bench and take a look at the rest of the parts that come in this kit. So of course you get the two lower control arms, and they are a right and left version. So on this one, this is the passenger side, this is the driver's side, and we know that because this is the mount for the strut rod that goes up in the front here. In fact, on these ones, what's nice about this is they put this bolt in the hole that you want to use for your car. They make these for different cars, different years, and for my car, for the 66, this is the hole that I want to use, and they put that bolt in here for me, which is great, so I'm good to go. In fact, what's really great about their whole setup is everything's already set up from Mike Meyer to just install it. I don't need to worry about adjusting this right now. I can put it in the car and it'll be more or less the stock settings. And then when I take it for an alignment, then we can adjust this and get the camber and the caster and stuff that I want to do. But I know that I don't have to worry about figuring out where this needs to go before I get to alignment. I don't have to worry about the car hunting and diving all over the road because the suspension geometry is all messed up. This is locked in where I need it to be to just get me going and get me down the road. So again, driver's side, passenger side, lower control arms. And then you've got the two strut rods. And this is another great thing about Mike's kit is that most places you have to buy this and you have to buy this separately. You can buy adjustable strut rods from various companies, but they include it with this kit. And on top of that, this is all made out of billet. This is designed to fit exactly my car. I don't have to worry about shaving anything or modifying anything. This will go right in my car just how it is. And again, the length is set. I don't have to worry about adjusting this tube right now to adjust the caster on my car. This will go in just how it sits. We have those two pieces. Then you get some, you're gonna need these bushings that go in for right here on the lower control arm when you're mounting that into the car. get the cotter pins that go here on top of the ball joints. And then you've got the dust boot that's going to go on the ball joint here when you get that installed in the car. Everything's left in this little bag that you need. And then they also provide a set of instructions on how to do that. Pretty simple, basic tools to do this. There's no, in fact, what's great about this too also is the lower control arm is the easier of the two to install. You know, with the upper control arm, you have to take the shock and the spring out and get a spring compressor and all that kind of stuff. With this, you don't have to worry about any of that. This just unbolts from the car, bolts right back in, and away you go. It's going to be a pretty quick installation. So let's get started. Like with anything that we're going to want to do in these cars, make sure you jack it up and put jack stands underneath there. You want to be safe. You don't want the car falling on you. And another one of those pro tips is when you take the tires off, because we have to do that, put them underneath the car as well. If for whatever reason the jack stand fails or something happens, it tips over, whatever happens, you've got those tires underneath there to help hold the car, and those are not going to get squished, right? Those are a fixed height. So as a safety backup feature, it's always nice to do that kind of stuff. So it doesn't matter what side you start on, you're going to need to disconnect the sway bar from both lower control arms, and you're also going to need to take the bolt out for the cross member, because the head of the bolt for this lower control member bolt back here won't come out because this is in the way. So take those both out before you start either side. Now with the sway bar undone and that cross member out of the way, we can go after getting everything taken off for this lower control arm. The first thing we want to do is go after this strut rod. We'll start at the nut at the end, and then we'll take these two bolts off here. We're going to use a 7/8 inch socket, and depending on what kind of gorilla put this on here, this might be on there pretty good. You might have to use a breaker bar to break it loose, and then you can use an impact driver to get it off the rest of the way. Now for these two bolts here on the strut rod, we're going to use 11/16 socket for the nut here, and then a 5/8 inch wrench for the bolt on top. Break those bolts loose. There we go. Now we can slide this out. The next bolt we're going to want to go after is the one here on the back end of the lower control arm. Now I've got a new bolt in here because I replaced these not too long ago, but this may be a problem for some of you guys. If you have the original bolt in here, it may get seized up inside the bushing inside there. You may have to cut it out. It may be a big problem for you guys. It's not gonna be an issue for me because it's new, but just a heads up on that. We're just gonna use a 3/4 inch wrench on the head of the bolt here, and then a 3/4 inch deep socket on the nut. Now all we have left is to just take off this castle nut and knock out the rest of this lower control arm. Again, if you guys are dealing with stock parts, this shaft here of the ball joint may be seized inside the bottom of this spindle. You're going to have to whack on it with a hammer on the side here, hit it on the top to break it free. Again, mine's a newer part, so I struggled with it when I swapped these out, but it shouldn't be too bad for me here. But for you guys, just a heads up, this might be a little time consuming. The super secret trick is to take the castle nut, flip it over, and put it on top, throw it back on there, and you can smack that with the hammer and it doesn't mess up the threads. That's a bigger deal if you're going to save your lower control arm. I'm going to say this because there's nothing wrong with them, but I probably won't ever go back to these. You can also use a pickle fork to separate these if you need to. I used that last time also. So let's get this off of here and finish this job. And I'm using a 7/8 inch socket for this guy. And then we got this off again. We're going to turn it upside down and then thread it back on here. And this is where you get your big hammer, whether you call this the negotiator or the convincer. So smack it on the bottom down here, and on the top of that ought to free this thing up. There we go. Now just undo the nut and we can pull this right out. Now we're ready to put in the new lower control arm. This is where you want to grab your bag of goodies that you have for each of the two sets. And we're going to want to put the dust boot on top of the shaft here and push it all the way down to as low as it can go, because this is going to fit up inside the bottom of the lower control arm. And then you're going to have actually a spacer on top of here between the nut and the top of that stuff. So push this down low like that, get that on there. And then we're going to want to hook up this end over there first. And this is where you're going to want to use those spacers, these two larger aluminum spacers, one on each side when we put that bolt in over there. Again, making sure you got the right, the right side for the right side. This this little hole here for the strut rod, this is gonna face forward, so this is the one we want for the passenger side. We're gonna come back and snug this down later. We don't need to tighten it up right now. So now we can swing this guy up and just connect it. You just move this, you can move this knuckle around, kind of fist it around till you can get this lower control arm to pop in there. And it's not gonna seat all the way yet, but that's okay. So what we're gonna wanna do now is put on this spacer. Now this may be specific to certain years, but I have a 66, I need this spacer because the stud on the ball joint is taller than the bottom eyelet here of my knuckle. So I need this to soak up the gap, the distance. Washer and a nut. And we can finish setting this up later. Let's go ahead and get the strut rod in place, and then we can tighten everything down. All right, let's take the bolt out. And keeping in mind that in this one, the bolt is in this second hole, or the hole that's closest to the sway bar mount hole. I don't want to use this one. I want to use this one for my car. And in the instructions, the way that they say to install this, to have the bolt head facing down and the nut on the top side when you put it in the front of the strut rod mount point. So again, remember, this is a fixed, well, I mean, it's adjustable, but it's fixed from Mike Meyer to the proper length to get us going. So I can just go ahead and install this, again, making sure that the head of the bolt is on the bottom side. And we can just slide this in here and put the bolt in, and just, again, one of those things where we just put the nut on there just to hold it in place, and we can go back and we can tighten it later. All right, now we can put this part in, and this, because everything's kind of loose still, we can move this around so we can pull on this, and we can thread it out or fetch it up and so that it fits inside the hole up here. And you may find it's easiest to put a jack underneath the bottom of the control arm to kind of hold everything in place. And then you're supposed to put Loctite on this bolt. I'm just gonna put this in here just to hold everything in place. I'm gonna come back and I'll put Loctite on here. You gotta use blue Loctite, I'll show you that when we get to it. But for now, I'm just gonna thread this in here just so that everything's holding in place and we can start tightening everything down. Now that we got everything where we want it, let's go ahead and start tightening everything down. I'm gonna start with this castle nut here on the ball joint, get that tightened down, get the cotter pin in there, and then we'll work our way around. So they say you're supposed to put 60 to 90 foot-pounds of torque on this castle nut. I'm gonna start with 70 pounds. And then, there we go. And then I want to do is start to see where the castle lines up with the hole for the cotter pin. And that way, as I tighten it up this a little bit more, I've got some space, you know, some adjustment in my torque range that I can still get this thing to line up and it's not over torqued. There we go. That was easy. Now it's installed, we're good there. Let's go to the bolt on the end of the other end of the lower control arm. Now some people say to tighten these up, but not all the way, and then drop the car down and then finish tightening it up so there's no bind. But with the spherical joint here in the rod end, there's nothing to bind up, because if you tighten it up, it'll still spin inside there, which is fine, which is great. So we can go ahead and tighten it up all the way now. All right, we'll go ahead and get this bolt here on the end of the strut rod while we're here. I should have mentioned that before I installed everything, I did tighten this up, this string, because you can't easily get to the nut on top here. So I went ahead and did tighten that up before I put everything together. I should have mentioned that. Let's go ahead and pull this out so we can put the Loctite on this bolt. And what we're wanting to use is this blue Loctite number 242. This is the stuff they recommend to put on the end of this bolt here and thread it back in there. There we go, got some on there. And just thread it back in. There we go. And don't forget to put the sway bar end link back in. All right guys, and the last thing on here is your steering stop. You don't want to forget this. This is not set up in the stock location. This is something where you want to back the screw out and then you want to tighten that jam nut. This is for your spindle so that you don't overturn the steering wheel. I'm not going to set this right now. I'm going to have it done when I get the alignment done for the car. But if you are concerned, you can back this out a couple turns, and that way you won't overturn the steering wheel too far and bind anything up. So I'm going to leave this for now, but just something that's what this is for, just a heads up on that. You're going to want to set that. And then don't forget to put the cross member back in. Now I already went ahead and did the driver's side. That's why I was able to put the sway bar and the crossmember back in. But it installs the same way. Just do it in the same order as you did the passenger side and you'll be good to go. And one more thing on Mike Meyer parts. One of the things about his parts is because they're all made in his shop by hand, he does it himself, there can be a turnaround time a little longer than you might like. For example, it was a little over 2 months from the time I ordered these lower control arms until I got them. I'm okay with that. I want the best parts for my car, and it takes a little bit of time to get those. Some places have things right on the shelf and you can get those if that's what you're looking for. I knew I wanted what I wanted for my car and I was willing to wait for them. And that's something that if you guys just, you should know that heads up, that some of these parts may take a little bit of time. You may also order them at just the right time, where those parts, maybe they have a batch that they already made and you're good to go and the timing will be less. Depending on when you order stuff, they make stuff in batches, so it may take a little bit longer to get what you're looking for depending on what time of year you order. But it's worth it. These are the best parts on the market. This is what I wanted on my car, and I was okay waiting for them. All right, guys, don't forget to torque your lug nuts on your wheels. So that's it. That is the install. It's really easy. Handful of tools, I don't know, in 2 hours, and you're done. You're back on the road. Again, I recommend getting alignment. These things are set up to get you going. You can drive on the car and get down the road, but it's a good idea to get in and get alignment. I'm gonna try to sneak it in this weekend and see if I can get alignment done and get everything dialed in so I can start playing around with it. So again, quality parts, guys. I feel like I'm trying to sell you on Mike Meyer and I'm trying to give you the best information I can. I like his parts. I like his designs. This guy, he autocrosses. It's a lot of stuff that I've done in the past. He's kind of got the same mentality of the kind of way I want to build my car. He builds the parts of the kind of stuff that I want to have. And on a side note, not too long ago, I called him up and we talked for an hour and a half. He's the guy that's building all the parts in his shop, right? That's what he does. He builds the parts himself. These are all TIG welded by hand here in the United States by Mike Meyer. And he stopped what he was doing for an hour and a half and talked to me about the build that I was trying to do. And so people don't do that anymore. And that's another reason why I'm totally in on Mike Meyer and his parts and his company. And I'm happy to put this stuff on my car because this is the stuff that I want and this is the direction I want to head. And so you saw how good the parts went to install. Quality parts, they're built well. I'm not gonna have a problem with them. If I need to, I can service these parts. I don't have to buy a whole new set, a whole new arm or anything down the road. I can just buy a component if it were to ever fail. So that's awesome. Cool, all right guys, well that's it. That's all we needed to do for that. Super easy install. Guys, if you liked the video, give me a thumbs up. And if you subscribe, I appreciate it because it helps my channel out. And we'll see you in the next one.